Hello, everyone. My name is Prerak Garg. I'm part of the strategy leadership team at Microsoft in the Cloud and AI division. Today, I'm here to talk about four things. One is the generative AI and how it has caused the paradigm shift. Second, how it'll impact the future of work. Then we'll deep dive into a case study from healthcare, an area where which I'm very passionate about. And finally, what does it mean for all of us as we think about adopting AI into our companies and our daily lives? So if you look at the history of GDP growth, it's deeply correlated with the pace of innovation. For thousands of years, the GDP growth was very slow. It was primarily because most of the humanity was focused on agriculture. And we started seeing a major uptick with the Industrial Revolution and with the advent of innovations like steam engine, and then the internal combustion engine, invention of electricity, and most recently, the information revolution. Now we are at the brink of another major revolution, which will be driven by AI, and it'll turbocharge GDP and productivity by a great extent. So if you think about it, like we are in the still very early stages of this revolution. You can say this is pretty much the light bulb movement, to draw an analogy from the invention of electricity. So when Thomas Edison created light bulb, it did not lead to the productivity improvements that we saw subsequently. It was the hard yards put in by the later generation of innovators who created the washing machines, the vacuum cleaners, computers, eventually, that led to the productivity growth that we saw subsequently. And it is the same case with AI. We are in the very early stages. With ChatGPT, we have pretty much the light bulb movement of AI. And now comes the hard part of thinking about the second order, third order applications of AI, which may not be so obvious at this point, but this is where the opportunity is for all of us. And we need to move really fast because the pace of innovation has been accelerating. As you can see, it took almost 60 years for landline phones to achieve 80% penetration. And it took just 10 years for social media to achieve the same penetration. And with ChatGPT, you all know about it. It has broken all records. And it has become the fastest growing application that we have ever known. It achieved 100 million users in less than 2 months. And you all might be wondering why we are talking about AI, because it has been around us for quite some time. What is different this time? So if you think about traditional AI, we used to have one single narrow model for a specific task. So you have a model for summarization, then you have a model for translation, you have a model for data analysis, and so on. Now, what is different is you have foundational models which have cross-domain applicability. So these models are good at a range of tasks, whether it is sentiment analysis, writing poetry, history, you name it, right? And it's also visible in the data. So for example, GPT-3 is really good at a range of tasks, right? Whether it is history and sociology and so on. And with every generation of model, the performance is going up. GPT-4 is much better than GPT 3.5, and we have to see where we will be with GPT-5, which is coming soon. So it means that these models have broad applicability across different industries. So if you look at the x-axis here, it's the US GDP contribution. And on the y-axis, you have the percentage of tasks across industries which will be impacted by large language models. It's based on a study done by University of Pennsylvania and OpenAI. Now, traditionally, when we used to think about AI, we used to think about manufacturing and traditional industries, and think about robotics, workflow automation. And even 2 to 3 years before, we would never have thought about like AI will impact finance, it'll impact professional services, information technology, right? And if you look at this chart now, these are the industries which will be impacted by generative AI the most. And these are the industries which are also contributing to a large chunk of GDP. So we'll see a major overhaul in our economic structure and GDP. Other thing that has happened with generative AI has, initially human beings had to adopt to learn to interact with computers. Now with generative AI, it has turned the tables. Now computers adopt to human beings. So going back to the initial days of computing, we used to have punch cards, which were very difficult to use, a very physical manual process. Then came machine language and assembly language, which abstracted some complexity, made computing more available and accessible, but it was still very difficult. Only a few people in the world could use computers. Then we had higher level programming languages like C, C++, Java, Python. It democratized computing a little bit. We have 30 to 40 million software developers, which led to the digital revolution in the last couple of decades. Now English is becoming the new programming language. So it'll democratize computing from millions of people to billions of people, and it opens up the floodgates of innovation. And we have already seen like bunch of very interesting applications which are being created by innovators and creators all over the world today. So what it means for the future of work. I want to talk about GitHub Copilot. For people who don't know about GitHub, it's a software repository where software developers store their code. They built an AI software called GitHub Copilot. It helps software developers write code. So think of it like an AI programmer, pair programmer. It can help you writing full blocks of code. It can also give you autocomplete suggestions. And the software developers who are using GitHub Copilot, they have seen massive productivity gains. Almost 46% of the code is now generated by AI. And the developers using GitHub Copilot, they are 55% faster at generating code, and 75% of them are more fulfilled in their job. And it's not only software development, it's also knowledge workers. So it's a study done by Harvard Business School. They did this study on some very elite consultants, and they saw that consultants who are using generative AI, they are finishing 12% more tasks on an average, and they're completing these tasks 25% faster, and the quality improved by 40%. And what's not shown on this chart was the gap between the high performers and low performers also reduced. So in a way, it is also democratizing skills and intelligence. And if you look at the past era of collaboration, it has been mostly about how do we enable teams to collaborate better, whether it's emails, whether it's document sharing, or it's video conferencing in the last few years. But I believe the next era will be the era of copilots. I think a lot of speakers have talked about it, but I think this is where the puck is going. So you have a copilot for software developers, which is helping them write code. You have a copilot for security analysts, helping them find security threats. You have a copilot for finance professionals. So you will have these range of copilots, and these copilots could then be personalized as to your preferences. And you need a platform to run these different copilots for different tasks. And I think this platform will become the new operating system, and that's the shift I think that'll happen over the next few years. So we have talked about the horizontal use cases of these copilots. I also want to talk about a vertical use case from an industry, healthcare. So if you would have gone to visit a doctor in the US, you would have noticed that they're always busy typing notes. And they spend almost 2 to 3 hours every day outside of their work hours in completing the clinical documentation, which has become a major burden. This phenomena is called pajama time in healthcare circles, and it's a major, major problem for physicians that we don't know about. As a result, 40 to 60% of the physicians feel burnt out, and many of them want to leave the occupation. And more importantly, affects the patient experience as well, because when I go to the doctor, I feel like the doctor is not listening to me, I'm not being attended to. So it impacts the quality of care as well. And it's not only the visit, but this problem is persistent all over the healthcare in different parts of the workflow, whether it's nurses who have to complete the flow sheets, or doctors, again, who have to write patient summaries and reply to patient emails. And this is a perfect use case for generative AI. All you need, just to take an example of the patient visit to a physician, all you need is a speech-to-text API that can generate the transcription of the visit. And then using a large language model, which is trained on medical data, on millions of these patient-physician encounters, we are able to build a large language model which converts this transcripted conversation into a medically compliant note. The doctor has to just review it for accuracy and then push it into the EHR. So what used to take 10 minutes is now like less than a 10 to 15 seconds job. So it's helping doctors save a lot of time. And we see the real world impact. So physicians who use this product, they save a lot of time. Almost 97% of these doctors are more engaged in the patient visit. Patient feels heard. Almost 70% feel reduced burnout and fatigue. And 85% say that if they don't have access to this product, they will feel disappointed. And I was at HIMSS, which is a healthcare conference, one of the largest healthcare conferences in the US a couple of weeks ago. What was amazing was every booth, every company, they was talking about generative AI. And if you think about healthcare, it's an industry which has been a little bit behind in terms of adopting technology. It has been behind in terms of adopting cloud, but they're leading with generative AI. Every company was talking about generative AI, whether it's imaging, whether it's EHR companies, Microsoft, and every company was just talking about how generative AI is going to change healthcare. So it was just very energizing to see this impact in a very traditional industry. So what it means for all of us. First of all, the product needs are very diverse. Every company in every industry will need to think through how large language models will influence and apply in their industry. Every industry is very different, and that's where the opportunity is also there. You are the closest to the needs of your customers. You have to think about building new products and services for your specific use case. For example, in financial services, BlackRock is using LLMs to predict the outcome of earnings calls on the stock market. Similarly, in retail, Instacart is using large language models to give personalized recommendations to their customers. Similarly, there are like hundreds of use cases that different companies are exploring, and I would encourage you all to also think about how you can use AI to build amazing products and services that you sell to your customers. So not only for productivity, but how you can transform your products and services, and I think that's where the real opportunity is. So as I said, there are two ways. One is, yes, you can use these co-pilots, these agents, and improve productivity, become more efficient at what you're doing in your daily lives. But more importantly for your businesses, now you have to think about how do I use generative AI and reimagine the products and services that I've been building so far. And I wanted to leave you all with a framework if you're thinking about building AI. And a lot of people have actually talked to me, okay, how do I think about infusing generative AI in my business, in my product? Do I go very wide? Customers are asking for a lot. So I want to talk about how we did it for GitHub Copilot, which has become a blockbuster product. It's like probably the fastest and most successful Copilot out there. So the framework is simple. Find it, nail it, and scale it. So first of all, find a very high-value use case. For example, for GitHub, saving time for developers was a very valuable activity. We could totally see that every company will find it valuable. Second, you have to balance value with time to market, because if you want to pack a lot of features in the MVP, then you will be late to market. At the same time, if you deliver very little value, then people will not use your product. So you have to find that delicate balance, find the right use case. And then instead of being mile wide and inch deep, you focus on one use case and really nail it down. What it means is, you meet the customers where they are. So don't expect customers to change the workflow for you. When we were building GitHub Copilot, we build it as a plugin to meet the developers where they are. It's a plugin into developer environment. So if you're coding, you're in the flow, you don't have to change the workflow. Similarly, when you're building your initial product, think about the workflow and meet the customers where they're already in the workflow. And once you have that product market fit, it'll give you permission to sort of expand to other use cases as well and completely transform the customer experience. And at that time, you can think about, okay, how can I completely reimagine the workflow using AI? Finally, when you think about scaling, you have to think about pricing and cost. Pricing is very important because these products are very compute intensive. So they don't follow the same old SaaS cost model, if you will. When we launched GitHub Copilot, we went with the old industry standard per user per month pricing because that was easy for the developers to understand and it was predictable. And once you have early traction, then you can, of course, evolve the pricing models as you add more features to your product. And lastly, when you think about cost, maybe you start with GPT-4 because it doesn't make sense to sort of build your own custom model when you're just starting up a new business. Most of the startups don't have the resources to build their own model in the beginning, and that's the fundamental shift that has been caused by generative AI. Like any company now can build AI products. You start with GPT-4, but once you have product market fit, maybe you want to now use a mix of models. You diversify your model mix a little bit because you want to maybe use a standard narrow model for a very standard task like summarization, for example. There is no use for GPT for that. So you can really reduce your costs that way. So wanted to leave you with some final thoughts as you think about these use cases. First of all, think about what is the useful thing that you used to do is no longer useful. For example, if you're a product manager, maybe generating user journeys can be done out of the box by these AI tools. So that's not a very valuable skill to have. Second, what is the impossible thing that you can do now? I talked about healthcare and how it is transforming healthcare even with a very simple use case, but it was not possible earlier. Third, can you move to a wider market? There are a lot of consulting companies here. You're serving very elite clients, but can you productize your services in a way that you can actually serve a wider market rather than just a few top companies? And lastly, can you also punch above your weight? Like if you're a small marketing company or a small consulting company, now with AI, as we talked about, it's helping you close these skill gaps. Maybe now you can punch above your weight and move up market with a different set of offerings. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much, and I'll be here if you have any questions. Happy to talk to you.
Please